Hey everyone, welcome to our marriage conference. I am so excited that you're here with us and that we're able to share this incredible content with you. Before we get started, I just want to invite you to go ahead and hit the share button and let people know that you're watching and invite them to get these great tools. Perhaps you even know of some people that after watching this, you think, man, they need this. Go ahead and share that content to them. Also, if you could get the like button and the subscribe button, the bell button, and all the other buttons on social media that are there, that really helps us get the word out. Keep watching, because at the close of this, I have some special information that I want to share with you. So stay tuned for that. I want to give you, it's my privilege to be able to introduce and give to you a little bit of information about our speaker tonight, Brian Lindner. Brian is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and he's a clinical supervisor where he works at the counseling center at his church, which is Tree City Church in Boise, Idaho. And he loves the fact that he works at a place where they integrate spirituality and religion into the counseling process. He is married to his wife, Holly, and he has 2 boys and 1 fluffy dog. He's my friend. He has great stuff to share with you. Here he is, Brian Lindner.
Hey everybody, tonight I want to tell you about one of my favorite things. One of my favorite things is couples counseling, and I know it might sound a little bit weird to some people, but it is really my favorite thing. And I tell you what, people come in here to our counseling center, see me for counseling, and they're coming in for the first time maybe. They're bringing all kinds of things like maybe conflicts about money, tension points that they're having in their relationships, fights over in-laws, maybe parenting, and like how do we parenting these kids, and we're having conflicts about what the best thing to do is for our children, and they come in with all this hurt, and then get to dissect that and dive into it a little bit, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. And so I mean, there's lots of different reasons why people come into marriage counseling, right? You can imagine all the things. You may even thinking of them yourself, like, hey, I'm going into marriage counseling. It would be because of budgeting, or the way my spouse does this or that really annoys me, or the problem that we keep coming up with over and over again. I wanted to share you a little bit behind the scenes, but probably the number one thing that people come in for marriage counseling, what do they identify? They identify communication as being the problem. So they're coming and saying, you know, we're talking about the budget, but it's really how we talk about the budget and how I say things and how my wife says things that really make it difficult, and we're having a hard time being able to communicate with each other. And really, if I think about it, it does come down to communication, like all the different things, like the tension with in-laws, or tension with parenting, or addictions. It can really come down to how we communicate with each other. Communication is really primary to so many things in relationships. It's how we share and how we learn about each other. We have to communicate in order to have a relationship, right? It's how we learned what our spouse's favorite ice cream is, right? It's just everything becomes about communication. So I can understand how people come in and say, we're just not communicating, right? They have a communication problem. So to illustrate it, I wanted to give an example, tell you a little story. It's a story I wrote about in a blog years ago, and made up characters, but the situation is really something that you might relate to, and I see over and over again. how couples describe each other. So I tell the story of Sue and Chuck. And Sue and Chuck have been married about 10 years. They have two little boys, 6 years old and 4 years old. And Sue and Chuck are hanging out in the kitchen. They're looking out and they're watching the kids play in the backyard, and a little 4-year-old comes in with a little dandelion and says, "Here, Mom, this is for you. I picked this." And Sue says, "Oh, wow, that's really nice, honey. Thank you for getting me flowers." Chuck looks over and like, he's thinking to himself, I can't believe I have dandelions in my yard. I've been trying to take care of those. I wonder where the kid found dandelions in my yard. And so Sue looks over to Chuck and says, "Well, at least somebody gets me flowers." He's like, "Whoa, what's that supposed to mean?" She's like, "Well, you never get me flowers. The only flowers I get is a dandelion out of the backyard." He said, "Well, yeah, I don't get you flowers because they're super expensive, and you're the one always complaining about money all the time." She's like, "Oh, I am, huh? I'm complaining about money. That's because we don't have enough to go around." He's like, "Yeah, that's why I don't buy flowers, right?" So then the conversation continues to talking about his work and how she isn't able to, they're not able to go on vacation this summer because he wasn't able to get overtime. He says, "Well, it's because you always complain about me not being home. How am I supposed to get overtime and be home all the time? So you're the one that's causing me not to be able to do overtime, and that's why we're tighter on money. It's always about money anyway to you." And she's like, "Actually, it's about you being with me and the kids, and I can't believe that we're fighting again about this." That really plays out so many times in different relationships, is that one little thing that's innocent, getting a flower, ends up the conversation, the communication goes away that neither of them intended, where they're hurting each other and accusing each other. And it's really hurtful. Like, Sue and Chuck are loving toward each other. They love each other and cherish each other, and they have a good relationship. They would report they have a close relationship, but these conversations and the communication just tends towards hurting each other. And they're not sure exactly how that happens. And a lot of couples that I meet, I'm not sure how that happens. It just, wow, it just keeps happening that we end up in these conversations and we're always fighting about stuff, about little stuff that doesn't even matter, right? Fighting about flowers. It becomes about his career and how he's not able to spend time with his family. Like, whoa, that escalated quick, right? So, communication is such an important factor in relationships, and it's super common that couples miss each other, right? Like Sue and Chuck missed each other in their communication, and then they really feel like they're in conflict and they're not able to really say and communicate how they're feeling. So that happens all the time. Like, communication is super important, and we're chronically unhelpful in the ways that we communicate in relationships. So here comes counseling, right? That should be able to help solve some of this. So in lots of counseling, we get good marriage advice. We learn different skills like how to fight fair and how to never go to bed angry And here are some other good advice. Use I statements and describe. There's lots of other counseling type skills or communication skills. If you do this, this is the more helpful way to communicate. Here's some skills. Here's some fighting fair skills for you to have, and those are really like super helpful actually when you're calm and collected, and that you can have a nice conversation. However, that's not when you need the skills. The skills are needed most when you're having a conflict, right? When things are hitting the wall, like not literally, right? But like when things are really, people are really getting upset and you're getting heated and it's hard to figure out what all is happening. Then all communication skills you learn, right out the window. There it goes. There's no way that you can actually attend to those. It's really, really difficult. So you might be thinking right about now, like, great, thanks, counselor guy. I mean, you really told us that communication is super important. We kind of all stink at doing a good job of it. And even if we learned great skills at communicating and being able to express well, it would go out the window as soon as we have any kind of tension points. Yeah, that's not super helpful or really encouraging at all, right? Yeah, I get it. But wait, there's more. I'll tell you a more excellent way. And Paul was saying, when he said this, he pointed to love, right? The more excellent way is love. And that's exactly the point. The more excellent way, instead of concentrating on how do we communicate, it's more about what we communicate. So, and about what are we communicating. So much of communication has, let me step back. Communication has two parts to it. So I love telling couples, and I tell individual people in counseling all the time, even just this morning, that there's two levels of communication. And maybe I shouldn't say levels, because like one's not greater than the other or first, but there's two parts that are happening at the same time, all the time, in every conversation that you're having. And it's content and connection. So the first one, the content, is just what we're talking about. We're talking about doing the dishes. We're talking about that the dog pooped on the carpet. We're talking about budgeting. We're talking about what time are you leaving to go to work, or what time will we be home from work today. That's the content. It's like the logistics. It's the stats of the conversation. It's the thing you're talking about. That's all. I mean, every conversation has that, right? But then the other part of communication that sometimes gets kind of lost as we're concentrating on the what that we're talking about is the connection. And every time you're communicating with somebody, you're also communicating connection with that person. So with your spouse, whenever you say like, hey, the dog pooped on the floor, I can't believe that's happening, you're communicating connection and how you feel about the other person that you're communicating with. There's a relational component to all communication. So we're communicating not only the content of when you'll be home, I'll be home today at 6 o'clock, but we're also communicating what that person means to me, or to what extent are they a priority in my life, right? Those are the things that are being read into, no matter what we're talking about, is the content and the connection. And so often we can get distracted by the content, that we're losing track that we're actually talking about the connection that's happening in the conversation. And this is like really important because I keep emphasizing connection, and what it is emotion. And I know sometimes like, oh, we can't trust emotions. You might think that emotions are always changing, so how do you even trust that? But emotions are what drives us. Sue Johnson is a famous counselor that came up with the counseling theory, emotion-focused couples therapy, and she says emotion is the music to the relationship dance. And without emotion, then relationships are kind of flat, meaningless, right? So emotion is the music in your relationship. And really, in conversations and in communicating with each other, there's always this underlying note of the music that's happening between you and your spouse. Another story I wanted to share with you that kind of illustrates emotion. I was watching a video the other day, and it was a teacher, and she was saying how right now, during this time where like school is by Zoom, right? And so she was talking in this video how she was beginning her school year with students. She had been working really hard to get it all set up perfectly and learn how to do online teaching, and she was a band teacher, so she was getting all the different students that were playing different instruments into different Zoom sessions, and she'd been working really hard before the school started to kind of conceptualize school differently and online, and having all these different ways that she's going to implement the teaching this year. And she really came to the point where she had everybody divided up in these little groups, and she's really working at it really hard, and she's like really feeling for her senior class that she's been with the last several years in the band, and that she's kind of feeling for them like this is their senior year, and look how it's so different than they expected, but we have things that we need to accomplish. And so she goes into the Zoom with the seniors. She put them in a separate Zoom meeting, and so she comes into this Zoom room and says, hey guys, so we got these tasks to accomplish, and there's a lot going on. But she said she saw all of her students there even on Zoom. She looked at them and she just was overwhelmed with the emotion of how this is such a different year right now, and that she's not exactly sure how to do all the things. And she said she had one student that spoke up and said, you know what? Teacher Moffat, I can't remember exactly her name, but it's a teacher, really just want to be with you and be together. And she said, wow, that it's not exactly about the tasks, it's about the emotion of being connected to each other, right? Especially right now, right? So watching that video, I could feel her emotion coming out about how much she cares about these students of hers, and how the being together was just so impactful. We just want to be with you. You don't have to perform or do certain tasks or make sure we all learn certain things. It's like being together is the most important part, and that she felt such emotion with it. And just watching the video, I could feel that emotion. And really, like, that brings us to the point that, like, right now we have so much shared loss. If it's, COVID and the fires that are happening, political tensions that are happening in our world, and just like comes across as like, it's a new term, but it's like, that's so 2020, right? Like, it is a mess of a year. Like, so many tragic things over and over and over again. It's really becoming like 2020, wow, right? And so everybody kind of knows what that's like. It's like 2020, that's heavy stuff, right? And we're communicating. It's about exploring the emotions that we're feeling, about even like how this year is turning out, right? And to be aware of that. Sounds weird, but one of my other favorite things is grief. And it sounds funny because nobody likes the feeling of grief, but as a counselor, I appreciate grief in a different kind of way, because grief really provides permission for people to have emotions. And we kind of normalize, like, well, of course you have emotions in grief, and you can have emotions of anger, and you have emotions of sadness and grief, and we kind of give permission to people to have an emotion about grief. If you lose somebody you love dies, we extend permission for them to have emotions. And we tend not to do that as much when we're feeling other kind of losses, right? Like the loss that comes from stay-at-home orders, and that school changes, and that work changes, and trying to find toilet paper changes. Well, that's kind of funny. But we have like this ongoing loss cycle of 2020 is difficult, right? And so there's this emotion that is continuing through this year, and I'm sure that you've probably felt a variety of different emotions during this year, where so many different things are happening, unexpected things. Another thing that I tell people that come into counseling is it's okay to stop and pause. Sometimes people are rushing to get into counseling. They got an appointment time, they're coming, and they sit down on the couch or the chairs or however they're set up, and they're just like, whew, they give a big sighs. Sometimes they just sit and say, wow, all right, you guys made it. It's a big week. And here you are. And just let them have a pause. And maybe right now we can have a pause as you're watching this. It's like, wow, we've made it through quite a bit this year. And it makes sense to have different emotions about that. One of the things about 2020 is that I've been trying on a new profession. So this is me being a surgeon, right? Here's my surgical mask. And I walk around the stores and I'm like, wow, who knew so many surgeons right in the middle of surgery are coming into Trader Joe's today, right? And so, this mask gets a little old, sometimes gets a little fuzzy in there. Kind of itches my nose, so I traded masks. So look at this one, it looks like a little bit more fancy, a little pokey nose. See that I got the profile there? Pretty awesome, right? So these are things that we're getting used to in 2020, is wearing different kinds of masks. And like, we would have never thought in 2019 that different kinds of masks are being pretty hot sellers, right? We can have, there's like clear mouth masks, there's face masks, there are all kinds of different things. And who knew that that was even gonna be a thing, right? So as you're taking a pause and thinking about all that you've been through and what emotions that are happening, I want you to think right now about, reflect on when you felt really close to your spouse. For me, a trip to Hawaii comes up, and think about walking on the beach, and it's just us, no kids, just me and my wife, and we're walking on the beach in the sunset, and it's like perfection, right? It's like, wow, I am loving my wife right now. This is really beautiful. That comes to mind. What else comes to mind is like a little bit more of a daily activity. It's not quite as like ultimately romantic as a Hawaiian sunset walk, right? Like, how often does that happen? A few times in a lifetime, right? But me and Holly like to sit on the porch together in the mornings, and during that time we have prayer, and we read the Bible some, and talk about the day. But it's a time for us to connect and kind of collect ourselves before we go off into the day. And it's a way that for me, when I think about times I feel most connected, it's in those times where I get to be together with her and intentionally asking how she's doing. And a little thing that we've come up with that's kind of code for helping us attend to each other's emotions and what's really happening with each other is like, we sometimes ask each other, how's your heart right now? And that really gets to the point, right? Different than how are you? It's purposeful, and I want to know her emotions and how she's feeling on the heart level. Because the heart of a great marriage is communicating connection. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is the point here, this little chat, is that we can communicate about what we're doing today. What kids are coming over, when school is happening, when the guitar is happening, and like the comings and goings to soccer. Let's see what our life has been about. But we can have communication about the logistics and the content. But when we slow down just a little bit and have conversations about our heart, that really connects us to the emotion. And that really communicates so differently. And the connection is what marriage is really all about. So I don't want to leave you without a couple practical ways that you can, even tonight, communicate connection with your spouse. So one of the prime times in relationships are when you're coming and greeting each other from being apart, and when you're leaving each other or going to bed at night or going to work. So it's the greetings and the goodbyes. Those are prime time to emphasize that you care about their heart and you don't just care about the logistics. So it's about communicating connection. So tonight, before you go to bed, give your spouse an affirmation and tell them that you love them and something that you appreciate about them. And that will be a conversation about their heart and about connecting to them. That makes all the difference. And then before you go to work in the morning, or like you got to go to the next PTA event, or take the kids to school, do the same thing and say, I love you and I appreciate you. And make some specific thing about what you do appreciate about them, right? One of the things that I love telling couples, especially Christian couples, that's made such a difference in our relationship is we'll try to make a routine. This is the pastor that performed our ceremony, Hal Perkins, for our wedding ceremony. He said, every day, thank God for the blessing of your spouse. And so we've tried to make that a habit in our marriage, and often it happens on our porch time. And we intentionally thank God for the blessing of each other. And, in some days are easier than other days to come up with that they're a blessing, right? But we intentionally do that, and it aligns us with God's will for our relationship, but it aligns us with the motion of thankfulness for each other. And it kind of really sets it off on the right foot. And we've now made that a routine and a habit in our marriage. And it's really made it a huge difference. And I encourage you to do the same every morning. So in conclusion, I just wanted to cap off to say that communication is super important, and no matter how skilled you get at it, it's really about the emotional component of what you're saying to each other, and to attend to your spouse's heart, and to make sure, no matter what, even if you're communicating about the budget, that communicating that you love them and that they're important and their ideas matter to you, and you're connecting relationally, then you guys can problem solve all the math, no problem. And it's not as contentious if you know that you trust each other at the very heart and communicate that connection. So no matter what, if you're connecting with your spouse about their emotions, then no matter what 2020 brings, I guarantee you that you can keep a smile on your face.
Thank you so much for watching, and we're so glad that you stayed tuned in. If anything that Brian shared with you kind of touched your heart, or maybe God touched your heart and said, there's somebody in your life that needs to hear this, I would encourage you to go ahead, do that right now. Share the content with them, send them a message, share the link. We want to make sure to be able to make this as accessible as possible. That said, we also want to share with you, you can access this content on demand anytime on our regular channels that our church has: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Just go to camnaz.org, click on one of the social media icons, and it'll take you right to the place to get that content. Or you can just download our app. Our app is the best place to find all of our information and all of our content. It's Church Center, and then you just put in CamNaz to set up our church, and then boom, you've got it. You've got all the videos. If you want to connect with Brian, the best way to do that is to go to his church website, treecitychurch.com, click on the counseling tab on the top right, and that'll lead you right to their counseling ministry, and you can get connected there. Make sure to tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. to get tomorrow's episode with Rob Oram. You're going to love that too. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.
I love couples counseling. I love it. Love it. Love it. Is this lamp coming out of my shoulder? Is it okay to talk in a mask? Mask. Hello. Hello. Pointy. What? My nose has never been so pointy before. Oh, look. It's a nice double chin mask. Now this is about the best time of my life. Makes me want to go. I'm about the most serious marriage counselor ever.